Special Operations, Covert Ops, Espionage, The Team House, with your hosts, Jack Murphy and David Park.
Hey, this is The Team House, episode 116. I'm Jack Murphy, here with my co-host Dave Park. Tonight, our guest on the show is Luis Fernandez. He served in the 82nd Airborne Division as a platoon leader, where he deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. He has some pretty wild stories to share with us tonight. He is also the host of his own podcast, Built with Grit, and he is an author. His book on leadership, what's the title of your book, Luis?
Keep on leading.
Keep on leading.
Keep on leading?
It's on Amazon in both paperback and Kindle.
And today he works as a business consultant. So, Luis, we're very happy to have you on the show tonight. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you guys don't understand. I kind of feel like, like every once in a while, the Marine invites a celebrity to the ball and then she actually shows up, right? Like that's kind of how I feel like that Marine today.
You're our celebrity.
No. It's the opposite here.
So you're the 18-year-old Marine and I'm Jenna Jameson? Is that what that
beautiful? Yeah.
Who's Jenna Jameson?
I just heard that name thrown around, like Mia Khalifa. I mean, you hear my friends talking about it sometimes.
Oh.
I don't know.
I must not have seen those movies.
Yeah.
I'm not the artsy
Mom, if
type.
you're listening, do not look that up.
So, Luis, the first question we always ask our guests is about their origin story, about what your upbringing was like and sort of what that path was that took you into the Army.
Sure. So I am the child of two Cuban refugees. My parents both were born in Cuba and they came to the U.S. My mom was younger. My dad was a little bit older as a teenager. And then he joined the 82nd Airborne as a medic. And did that for a few years, left the Army, married my mom. And a few years after that, he went to get his doctorate at the University of Tennessee. And by that point, I was 4. So after college, my dad joined the Navy. And so I was a Navy brat growing up. Never lived more than 4 years any one place. Spent most of my teenage years in Europe, which was pretty cool, in Rota, Spain, and then in Naples, Italy. And then came home for my senior year of high school, which really sucked. Not knowing anybody, going to, moving from a school with 500 students, 7 through 12 to 600 seniors in a high school. It was like, I didn't know anybody or anything. And I stopped to a couple different recruiters my senior year, just kind of like, I needed some sort of direction in my life. And my dad at the time, he was, I want to say he was 04, Navy 04.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he talked me out of it. He's like, nah, just go to college. Like, you don't want to be a Marine. Like the Marine recruiter told me something like, oh, yeah, we'll send you to basic and then you can go to college. He's like, don't do that. They're lying to you. Just go to college. So I listened to my dad and I went to college, and I got to college. And as soon as I got there, I hopped into the ROTC program and I went into Army ROTC. And at the end of my freshman year, my dad called me again and was like, look, you want to focus on your school, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of talked me out of it again. So, I listened to him and I got out. And then in my sophomore year, on an early September morning, some planes hit the World Trade Center. And I called my dad and I said, I'm going to drop out of college and enlist in the Army. And so now the negotiations have moved, right?
Right.
From, I want to, this thing looks fun to I'm literally changing my life today. So this time he wasn't able to talk me out of it. He kind of, solicited all the help he could get. And my mom's dad called me. So my grandfather, and he told me the story of how he came to the United States. And I'd heard the story a bunch of times before, but, when the paterfamilias, and especially in Latino culture, when abuelo wants to tell you a story, you sit down and you listen to the story, right? So he talks to me about having 4 kids and working 3 jobs, not knowing English, pumping gas, delivering newspapers, just doing whatever it took, so his family could, have opportunities. And then he said, you know why I told you that story? And I was like, no, well, I don't know why you told me this story. He goes, because you owe me. No, that one hit hard, right?
Right.
He goes, I did all that for you. I didn't know you then. I didn't know who you were or what you were going to be, but I did it so you would have this opportunity. So you owe it to me to finish your school. Then you can go do the Army. So I listened. So I went back to the ROTC program, and it was like sometime in October, and I was like, yeah, give me the scholarship. I changed my major. I started in engineering. I went to history. I was like, my focus is going to war. And college was kind of like secondary. And I really dove into ROTC. There was a program there, tactical group at University of Florida called the Gator Raiders. And it was kind of like a little bit of a silly group when we first started. It was just guys that really liked playing in the woods and doing the tactic stuff. And me and a good friend of mine, Chad Shields, we kind of really, by that point, war was real, So Gator Raiders at the time was like an activity. To now, everyone that's there that is going to graduate college will go to war. Like, we knew that was the case. And actually, that was what we wanted, right?
Right.
We didn't know what we were asking for then, but that was our goal. And so we took the group. It was like 9 guys when we started. By the end, by our senior year, it was 40 cadets. Wow. And we were going to Fort Benning, doing air assault into a 3-day FTX, hitting the Mount City at the end of it. I mean, like legit tactics. Of the 6 seniors that graduated my year, we were ranked 1 through 6 in the battalion. Out of the 5,000 cadets in the nation, the lowest guy was like 900 something. All 6 got Ranger tabs, and 3 of the 6 went SF. So it was a pretty good cohort of guys that we were training with. So I graduated in 2004, and June 6, 2004 was my start of infantry officer basic course, which was the 60th anniversary of D-Day. It's a really cool day to be your first day in the Army.
Right.
And you guys never went through IOBC, right?
No.
So IOBC is basically a pre-ranger program. And they do not, you will go to ranger. In fact, the day you get in, it's like a big stadium, right? And there's little packets in front of each seat. And so they walk us, you walk in, you sit down, and they're like, gentlemen, in front of you is the Ranger release form. This is you accepting to volunteer to go to Ranger School. Ranger School is not a requirement. Every one of you will go, sign the paper, pass it to the right. Sign the paper, pass it to the right. Like, okay, welcome to Infantry Officer Basic Course. Like, that was like the first.
So coming out of ROTC, like, it was already determined you were going to branch into infantry.
Yeah, so actually I put in my request, and my requests, infantry and MI were my top 2, and I actually got them both. So I got military intelligence was my branch, but I was detailed to infantry. So my first 3-ish years were infantrymen, and then I went into MI after that.
Okay. What caused you to change your major from engineering to history? Did you focus on military history? Were you concerned?
No, I wanted to. University of Florida didn't really have that.
Most universities don't.
No, not on the bachelor level. So they had requirements that you had to take non-American, non-European history to get your, honestly, I thought it was going to be easier.
Okay.
I was pretty good in engineering, and I probably, now looking back, like, not only would it have been more beneficial in my career post-Army, but it probably wouldn't have been as hard as the time suck with history. Because that you read so much. You're right, at least 5 pages every single week.
Right.
Most of my the folks that I went to college with, they were pre-law. So they're pumping out lawyers is basically, so you read something and you kind of determine what is the thesis, and then it was making an argument about whether that author was correct about their assessment of this historical event.
Interesting.
So you go to IOBC, then Ranger School.
Yep.
But this is like the dream is coming true here. I mean, it's highly competitive for officers to get into infantry and then to get into the airborne infantry.
Yep.
You found your way into the 82nd Airborne.
I did. I was very lucky. And my best friend Chad, who I talked about, he also went to the 82nd. And then when I started OBC, kind of the group of guys, when we showed up, everybody, you already know what unit you're going to when you show up to OBC. So you actually have a unit patch. So it was like, okay, there's my fellow guys that are going to the 82nd, and you kind of form these relationships. And it turns out, a lot of those lieutenants were going to the same battalion that I was, because they needed those replacement guys to get ready for Afghanistan.
What I know that as an infantry officer, Ranger School used to be, really important for progression and highly encouraged. But was it the war that kind of made it sort of that mandatory thing where you were just going to go?
Honestly, man, I don't know. I do know a couple. One is that that was my experience. And my friend Chad had actually gone to airborne school in college as a cadet. I went after Ranger School. So I got to go to Ranger School as a leg, which, by the way, was freaking amazing.
Right, you didn't have to do the jump.
All of you guys can shake your heads.
What a disappointment.
If you're going to go to Ranger School, get as fat as you can to the point where you can still pass the PT test and run 5 miles in 40 minutes.
That's true.
And if you can go as a leg, that's gorgeous, man. It's gorgeous. You get to sleep while everybody jumps, and you got less risk of getting injured.
Yeah, I mean, that jump is the jump. Was it one jump or two? I don't remember. But it's a risk. It's an unneeded risk when you're in that kind of course.
We jumped into the field exercise at Darby, and then we jumped into Florida phase.
Right.
And then I believe we jumped into the actual FTX, the field portion of Florida phase as well, if I recall.
And the legs got to bus in, and you didn't have to be up at 0 dark 30 for the,
Well, we did.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So my class only had one jump, and it was into the FTX in Florida.
Okay.
They did get us up, and all of us got to carry the I think, I don't know if it was a 60 then. It was like in that time that but we were all heavy machine gunners.
What was your Ranger School class graduation number?
Oh man, I don't know.
What year was it?
It was December of 2004 when I graduated.
Oh man, we were right on top of each other. I was 0404. I think I graduated in February.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah. It was freaking miserable. It was terrible. I got to spend a little bit of extra time. They did me a favor because I was really good at racking up major minuses. A particular skill when you're not a quiet guy. By the time I got to Florida, I kind of had to figure. Actually, my second time through mountains is when I figured out to just shut my damn mouth and do it. Go Forrest Gump style, right?
Yeah,
that was
absolutely. So what was it like being a cherry PL in 82nd when you show up? I know you're probably not allowed to say cherry. That's probably not politically correct anymore. But I heard tales back in the day that they used to make you guys your first jump. You had to put one of those little miniature cherry pies from the gas station in your cargo pocket of your pants.
Yeah, there's stories of that. There's stories of like the red helmet. So what I did see, so here's the thing. By the time I got to the 82nd, it was February of 2005. We were deploying in March. So I didn't jump before I left to Afghanistan. So there wasn't a whole lot of time for shenanigans, but there were some time for shenanigans. I mean,
there's always time for shenanigans in the infantry.
I had a couple buddies one time. They texted me and said, "Hey, we need your help. They're coming after us." And I was like, "What do you need?" And then I guess by that point, they had caught him. They tied him up and stuffed him under his desk, and then snapped the photo and sent me that photo. And it said, "Come get him." And so I was like, "Nope. I think I'm going to let you stay there for a little while. When your guys get tired, I'll come get you." And there was another one. They stole his car keys and put a little on his throttle, so whenever he let go of the throttle, it would push a button and play the like every time he let go of the throttle. They took his top and cut off the Ranger tab and put Ninja in purple handwriting. He didn't realize it and was standing in front of the battalion commander. And the battalion commander was like, "What is that shit on your shoulder, LT?" So, there was a lot of. I mean, I was always watching my back, trying to be real careful because, you were fair game. I mean, that's how you got in. You've got very limited time to build kind of this, and it's a test to see like what kind of person you are. Honestly, like the soldiers want to know, like,
Right.
do I have a dirt bag or somebody that can handle it and is going to dish it back? So
Right.
I mean,
It's one of those things where they wouldn't do that to you if they didn't like you. Like if they really thought you were no, really. I mean, if they really didn't like you, it's just like, oh fuck this, get away from them.
But also, I mean, a lot of that hazing, even whether it's it's sort of to see if a guy can handle the pressure, because if people get spun up, whether they're an officer, enlisted, or whatever, if they get spun up about things like that, they're like, well, how is this person going to react when shit's really on the line?
Exactly. Yep. So yeah, and I got my meeting, my platoon. I graduated Airborne school Friday morning, and we actually had a girl die in our last.
That was your class.
Yeah, it was like the third jump.
I remember when that happened.
Oh wow.
Yeah, she had a
streamer?
cigar streamer.
Yeah.
And so I remember, the guy on the ground, they're like, pull, check Kennedy, he's doing that. And he goes, check Kennedy, pull your reserve, pull your reserve, pull your reserve. And then and of course, when they say that, you turn around and look. And it was, I mean, we had a memorial ceremony for this young, 18-year-old girl. This is like, I haven't even been in the Army a year yet, right?
Yeah.
They do this memorial ceremony, and then they march us out of that. And then they, pin your wings on you. And then that's it, and as a lieutenant, like, you're free to go. Good to see you later, so
This shit's
I was
real.
like, what do I? Yeah. And so I picked up the phone. I called the incoming, battalion. It was going to the White Devils at Fort Bragg. And so I was like, hey, I'm down. Like, what do you want? And the S1 there was like, can you be here today? I was like, well, I'll be late, but I guess so. So I drove from Benning to Bragg, got there at like 4 PM, and I walk in, and battalion commander, he's a big guy, 6 foot something, 200 something pound. I'm 5'7", like, usually everybody's taller than I am. And walk into the office, report. He's like, did you graduate Ranger School? That's his first question. Like, yes, sir. I did. He's like, all right, I know where you're going. And he picks up the phone. He called Captain Brandon Teague, who is now a full-board colonel. And honestly, best leader I've ever met. Just incredible dude. But I didn't know that at the time. It was just, he's not a very big guy. He's not very assuming, like, watch enough action movies, particularly growing up in the 80s and 90s. Like,
Right.
You've got your Schwarzenegger, Stallone. Like, this is what you think is like a tough guy. And a guy that walks in looks a lot like me. Just another guy. And, dude earned himself a Silver Star while we were deployed. So he comes in, shook my hand, and we walk across the field, go into the office, and now this is real, right? Like, this is my real office. I'm really going to get a platoon. And he sits down, and as I walk into his office, then I realize, like, oh, this dude's legit. He's got like best Ranger competition stuff on his wall, and like all of these things. And I'm kind of looking around, and the XO comes in, tosses a can of beer at him, tosses a can of beer at me, and I'm sitting here holding this can of beer. I just got out of Ranger School, gentlemen. Like, we don't break rule. Like, they broke me, right? Like, I had some PTSD from that school, man. I'm sitting in here holding a beer in a government building. I must have had this look on my face. And he goes, feel free to open that, and then takes a sip. I was like, okay, here we go. And he informed me that the following week was a platoon live fire movement to contact with a Mount House shoot house, and that I was going to lead my platoon in that exercise. And I was like, well, I just got here like 15 minutes ago. I don't have any CIF. Like, I just got this uniform. That's fine. You borrow some from the XO. And so that was my first day as a platoon leader, was leading the platoon. And, you did some dry fires and stuff, but that's how I met him. I met him in the field. And it's like, okay, here we go.
Hell yeah.
How now the 82nd, because we're talking about like 2004, 2005 at this point in time, right?
Yeah, this was February 2005.
So I'm assuming that a lot of people in that platoon had been deployed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the majority had.
And as like a body bar, as a brand new, lieutenant, like coming on, like how do you gauge how much to lead? Like how much is over
Right.
leadership? How much is I'm too hands off? Like that, I think that would be a very hard thing to do.
Yeah, it is. I had, when I was in ROTC, we had a master sergeant, and actually one of the cadre was an SF major, scuba guy, that was prior enlisted. And, I talked to them a lot because I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. And both of them basically told me, like, you need to shut up and listen. You need to really listen to those NCOs. And the guys that you're going to go lead, especially if you're going, to where you want to go, they've been there before, pay attention and then know your own shit real well.
Right.
And so I was really good at a lot of stuff, calling fire on the radio, 9-line medevacs. Like I had all of that stuff really. I mean, it was just, I didn't need to look at anything. Like I made sure to take it real serious, and know how to, like, the fundamentals of fighting, which once you really get into it, right, some of that goes out. Then you learn like how to actually fight.
Right.
But I knew my job well. And then I made sure not to overstep it. And then also to let the NCOs know, like I recognized, and I would ask them advice and let them know, like, hey, I know you know better than I do. So tell me kind of, what would you do? What are your recommendations? And of course, at the end, I got to make a call, right? So it was
right.
But soliciting the advice, and sometimes you disagree, and it's like, okay, well, if it goes to shit, then it's on me, right? But if it does, then you go apologize, like, hey, you were right, and that's gonna build some of that, that trust, right? That's the key that you're talking about, right? Like, how do you build that trust, and they feel comfortable making the decisions, and having that humility is fundamental. The right mindset. My job as the leader is to remove obstacles. In combat is a little bit different, but generally as a leader is to remove obstacles and serve the team. So if you have that mindset, you're going to be okay. Like, you never know what conversation is going to bring, but if your mindset is, I'm going to serve this team, and I'm going to remove obstacles so they can do their job, because these are the guys that are actually going to get the job done, you're going to be more successful, and they're going to recognize that too. You can't pretend that, right? You got to live it. And if you live it, they're going to notice it. These are smart people, and they've been there before, so they can tell. That's the part of that hazing that you were talking about, right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about kind of getting amped up and preparing for this deployment to Afghanistan. Like, when you took the platoon, was there some, was this deployment already scheduled? Were you guys going into like a pre-mission training process? What did that look like?
Yeah, and that's what that live fire was. Mm-hmm. It was, they were already basically on their tail end, right? So this is the approval, the blessing to, you're ready for combat. Everything was packed. My stuff got added in kind of like later, type thing. They were ready to go, because we were deployed in March. So I got to unit in February, and by March we were in Afghanistan. So it really wasn't, I didn't have a lot of time to really get to know those guys. Mm-hmm. But we were pre-deployment. We spent a lot of time together. It was only a month, but we were pretty much together every single day for a whole lot of hours of the day, in that month preparing to deploy.
And where did you guys get deployed? Talk to us about your arrival in country.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting, so we went to Salerno. FOB Salerno was our final destination, which is in coast. You both shook your head, so you probably know. So that's eastern Afghanistan. If anybody's looking at the map, it's that little lip on the eastern side. So FOB Salerno, and it was a hot day, and get out, and the smell of the prop blast, and it combined with that hot desert air. It's like it felt like I was on a different planet, right? And you've never really experienced, like I had not experienced that kind of terrain before, and so it was like, okay, this is real. And then within a week, within the first few days there, we actually got rocketed. And I was leaving the MWR, and I was heading back towards my tent, and the first rocket came in, flies overhead. And I was just like looking up at it, like, whoa, what was that? You know, and another one came in. I was like, holy cow, look at these things. You know, I was just amazed at these rockets, right? My company commander comes flying by. He's got his whole gear on. He's like, get in the bunker, you fucking idiot. You know, like, oh, shoot, that's right. This will kill you, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was our welcome there. Within, you know, I hadn't even unpacked anything. I don't think we even had a lot of our gear. And yeah, so it started off like that, and then once we arrived in country, the company actually got the Frago. So we had deployed. Our mission was going to be, you know, kind of your typical coin operations in Coast Province.
Yeah, you were replacing the Marines, right?
We were, yeah,
because I was there that winter, 2004 into 2005. So probably like right before you arrived.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was 2-3 Marines, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, interesting story about those guys. So I was going out. Actually, my first mission was with them. You know, left seat, right seat. So it was a right seat ride with the Marines, and I was riding in the back seat behind their PL. And this is a funny thing about Train How You Fight. You know, the Humvees don't really have AC, so we would roll back at Bragg with the windows down to get some of that breeze. And so that was the first thing I did when I got into the Humvee, because that's just how I had been training.
Right.
And we're leaving the wire, and the Marine he must have heard the air sound, and he kind of looked over his shoulder, and he's like, you may want to put that window up. And I was like, oh, okay, why? You know, like it didn't occur to me. He's like, dude, if IED blows up, that's a bulletproof glass. It's going to keep you from blowing your arm off. Oh, shoot, okay. And so I put it up. About a few weeks after that, I was on QRF. And I got called to an IED event, and one of our guys, not my company, a different company, they had been rolling around in Coast with the windows down. The driver had his arm out, and IED blew his arm off.
Jesus.
You know, yeah.
So what happened with this Frago? Where, I mean, it sounds like things got interesting for your deployment there.
Right. So 7th Group was down in Loara in Camp Tillman, which is named after Pat Tillman. And they were getting ready to do a rip tow with another SF team. So actually 2 SF teams were coming in to replace them. And they requested 2 platoons of infantry to support them during this turnover because it was a place with a lot of combat, you know. So our company got that tasking probably because of our company commander who, you know, at the time I still didn't really know him very well. But I mean, the dude was a stud, a superstar. And so, yeah, but they picked platoon 1 and 2, and I was 3rd platoon. So 3rd platoon got left behind. And 1st and 2nd platoon, you know, pack up their stuff and they go to Camp Tillman. So now I'm reporting directly to battalion, as a platoon leader, which sucks. You know, it's, you know what it's like? It's like, that movie, The Office Space. And he's like, I've got 3 bosses, Bob. Right? Like, yeah, the battle captain, the assistant S3, the S3, and the battalion commander, and of course the sergeant major are all my boss, and they all have guidance. And
right,
yeah. So I got put on. I had to split up my platoon. Part of my platoon was the security detail for the battalion commander, and then the rest of us were quick reaction force in Coast Province. And there really wasn't a lot going on at that point still in Coast. So it was, you know, like an IED event and kind of responding to that. But most of what they just filled my time with kind of, you know, counter rocket patrols and, you know, stuff like this, which essentially they were effective. Like I have to admit, we ended up getting rocketed a whole lot less. But, you know, like counter IED patrols, it's when you put your hands over your ears and you stomp, waiting to see if you find it, you know, like that kind of mission. It's like, I don't want to do that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
But you know, in 2005 in Afghanistan, mostly was command detonated IEDs. So I drove slowly, I changed directions. And whenever I saw a good choke point where I would put a bomb, I'd get out and walk.
Yeah.
So we could usually spawn them. And then of course, when you behave that way, the enemy just avoids you.
Yeah.
Because they're not dumb either. I mean, they're looking for the guy who's blowing through town at 30 miles an hour, blaring some music, not paying attention. That's the dude they're going to click on. The one that's erratic and stopping randomly and, you know, that kind of stuff. So, So we were doing that. This was in May, and we had 2 platoons down south on Loire, and it was the first time that I seen real, like, reports of real combat. So one of the other platoon leaders, 2nd platoon, Lieutenant Dan Byers, was on a 2-vehicle convoy, and they got near ambushed. And it was a straight up textbook near ambush. And Dan turned into the ambush, just like your battle drill. One of his vehicles got high centered in the kill zone. It was his truck, and Dan got out of the truck, started shooting, machine gunner turned. I mean, RPGs, the real deal, right? And the other truck turned around, came back, flanked the enemy. I mean, they took him out, and then so I'm reading these reports, right? So, you know, when I was in college, I thought I was going to miss the war. I don't know if you remember, like 2003, it seemed like things were dying down. I was like, oh man, I'm going to miss the war. You know, and now I got all the way to Afghanistan, and I'm missing the war, right? Like, I'm running around doing these like, you know, counter ID stuff, and my buddies are getting into real combat. So I was like really itching to, feeling like, you know, I'm missing out, you know?
Right.
And the mission was only supposed to be like a month or so through the Riptoa, but they were like, hey, this is actually working out. We're having some effect. We want them to extend. And I was bugging my company commander, like, please let me go. You know, and I guess you ask enough times to say yes. And so I got the order that, hey, we're gonna flip a platoon every month. I was like, oh, great. I get to go down to Tillman finally. And so we drove down there. It's like a 3-day drive through the mountains. Axle on my truck broke. We were down for a while, which is a whole adventure in and of itself. And so we get to this spot, and it was a border checkpoint, and it was like they'd just taken some triple strand concertina wire around some area that was like a high traffic spot, and we're like, boom, okay, this is a border checkpoint. You know, there was nothing there. And so I meet with the PL. He's been out there for a week, and that was your mission, was to be at this border checkpoint for a week. So you imagine you've been out for a week, and I was like, okay, you want to show me around? He's like, what? This is it. Like, And so I was like, okay, well, where do you go to the bathroom? And he points over to this hole that they had dug. And they must have taken like a backhoe and just dug this like 12-foot hole and dropped like a 2x6 across the top of it. And that was where everybody was going poo. And I was like, you know, you go on that thing, you're going to either risk a splinter in your nuts, or you're going to fall, and then they're going to find you, and probably no one's going to fish you out of there. Like, I didn't want to do that, right? And it was outside the wire, on top of everything else, right? So, and then there was the sleeping area was 4 tarps tied to a single piece of rebar plucked into the ground. It was like, okay, you know, and there was 11 guys there. He's like, hey, you got to split up your platoon. One squad's going to go and run missions with the commander, or 2 squads are going to go run missions with the commander, and 2 squads are going to stay here at this checkpoint. Which, and you know, my platoon sergeant and I are talking about who's going to do what. So I'll pose the question to you guys, because I'm curious, like, your thoughts. Given the choice between running missions with the company commander or staying at that border checkpoint in what looks like a really hot spot with no protection, like, which mission would you pick?
Yeah, the
Probably
patrols,
do some
the
ops.
mission. Yeah, the mission.
Right. So, okay. I thought being at the checkpoint would be more dangerous, because we actually ran missions out of the checkpoint. And, well, I wasn't exactly correct about that. So platoon sergeant went out with the company commander. And then we were running mostly foot patrols out of this checkpoint, into like hellacious terrain, which is, you've had a few folks on this podcast before just talking about it. It's hard to describe like how terrible it is and how little air there is at, you know, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 feet. And literally everything is difficult. Everything just gets harder to do when you just can't breathe, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, we're kind of getting acclimated doing these foot patrols out there. And then the worst day of my Army career was June 10th, 2005. I was out on foot, a few, I don't know, 5 or 10 clicks away from the border checkpoint. And I hear on the radio a firefight that the other half of my platoon's in.
At the border, at the BCP?
Yeah, I was so I ran a mission out of that border checkpoint.
Right.
And then at the checkpoint, actually, Afghans had the security of most of the area. So we were just doing kind of counter patrols, right? Just checking all these different ingress routes and making sure that, that we didn't have any enemy activity. So we kind of had security of like that corner of the border. And then further south at Camp Tillman, the company commander was doing sort of coin ops with the SF guys out of Tillman. And they were out at the Manikandow Pass, which is another mountain range down there, and got into some heavy fighting. And it started early in the day. And, this is the thing about Afghanistan at that time and those guys, like, I think in every war, we kind of underestimate the enemy. I don't know if that's something that we do just because it's easier to psychologically feel like I'm ready to go into battle if you underestimate the guy you're fighting. But I underestimated them. I don't know if everybody else did, but these guys were highly trained. They moved in, I personally saw them moving in Overwatch formations with proper spacing, using hand arm signals. They had medevac routes, and they would stay and fight. And they fought hard. And they closed with you, just like we close with and destroy the enemy. That's how they fought. They fought like we did. And so my platoon got into this firefight, and I was so far away. I mean, I was like 40 clicks away, and I'm listening to it on the radio, and I can't tell you like how miserable. I mean, you could probably imagine listening to your platoon get shot up for hours and hours and hours. And it was like 10 to 12 hours they were fighting. SF team deployed. They got some QRF support. And, there was one point where I was looking at a map and I was like, well, 30 clicks. Like, we could probably make that. I could get there. And that's another thing, by the way, about road marches. If you're an infantry PL out there, the road march is not the event. It's how you get to the event.
Right.
So remember that you need to be ready to fight at the end of the road march. But no, my squad leader was like, no, we're not doing that. Like,
Yeah.
And my squad leader, Sergeant Miller, was actually, he was in the Q course and got injured, and then went to the 82nd to recover from his injury. So imagine the type of guy that he was. No, you can sit there on the radio and listen. So I just had a map in my lap, for hours and hours mapping out this battle and listening to the casualties. And we had 2 guys get shot pretty bad. Rob Kislow, he got hit 3 times, and he got medevaced out of the country. I didn't see him again until after we got back. And then Christensen was another one, and he got medevaced back home too. Neither of them died. Rob did end up taking his life a few years later. But as far as that deployment and that action, and that was, it just sucked, it really sucked just listening to that go on. And so it kind of felt like, all right, I'm even closer now to this war, and I'm even now still missing it,
Yeah.
But you found your way to get into the shit eventually.
I sure did. It wasn't but a couple weeks after that. I was back at that border checkpoint, and we got rocketed. Checkpoint was really small, and we got, I want to say, I don't remember exactly, but I want to say it was like 20 some odd rockets in a, it's a tiny spot. I mean, you basically just sit back near the mountain and just assume that the elevation of the mountain is going to stop them, and you're watching rockets land 100 yards away and just, exploding.
And how long? And so you guys didn't have at that point any HESCOs or any kind of, and I mean,
Nothing.
like the standard digging fighting positions on those types in that type of terrain is unbelievably difficult.
Yeah, no, at first we didn't. We ended up later in the deployment when we were doing those transitions. We stole some HESCO from Fob Salerno. And we took that down there and basically created a makeshift bunker. But that was later in the deployment.
Yeah.
At this point, it was still that tarp, and we just move away from the tarp and kind of move so that the mountain was in between you and where these rockets were coming from.
Yeah.
They were all coming from this same kind of hilltop.
Yeah.
And it was hilltop 2911 or 2911 or whatever. And that's by the elevation, 2,911 meters, which is about 10,000 feet. The mountain stood above everything else. And when we finally got up there and you look back, you're like, oh, wow, you can see, the entire battlefield from this mountaintop.
Right.
So after we got rocketed, we went up there. And I get up there and we're doing kind of an assessment of and we found some little places that they were, using to set up their rockets and stuff. And so I'm just kind of patrolling this area. And I hear, hey, we've got some, I get the hand arm signal, enemy right here, whatever. It's like, okay. And now it's on. And so I put my guys in, we make this hasty ambush position. It was a great spot. We kind of, the way the trail was, it was sort of a drop off. And then there was the walking trail path underneath us. And I was like, I'm going to obliterate these guys when they come. We're just going to be plunging fire on them. There's nothing they can do. So I'm ready to go. And I'm waiting for this enemy patrol. And I see one of our Afghan guys, one of our Afghan soldiers, the company commander of the Afghan forces, walks into my kill zone. And I'm doing this, get out of there, get out of there. I'm trying to do hand arm signals to get out of there. And he gives me a thumbs up. And I'm like, no, not thumbs up. Just go, man, get out of there. And then he turns around and he spots them and he fires a burst. And of course they disappear. So now it's great. So I'm like, hey, troops in contact. I don't know exactly what's going on, just that I'm in contact. So stand by. And, we chased them a little bit and they crossed the border. So 2911 was right on the border. Half of the mountain was in Pakistan and half of the mountain was in Afghanistan. And so we get to the border and we got to stop. The way the rules of engagement were, we couldn't chase anybody into Pakistan. So we stopped on the Afghan side and they knew our rules of engagement. They ran for a while and you could see them. And at one point, the one guy stopped running and he turned around and he waves at us and he keeps walking. And I was like, man, that son of a bitch. My squad leader, that guy that I told you about, he was trying to shoot this guy. And I was like, dude, that's more than 800 meters, man. It's beyond the maximum effective range of your weapons. I'm going to hit him, he's trying to shoot this guy. We found a video camera and it had all kinds of intel. You could see them reconning our positions. Saw myself, saw other guys and their guys. And then there was some surface to air missile type stuff that they had. And so it was like, okay, these guys are, they got a lot of equipment here. We take that, pass the intel back. And then that night we see lights on that mountain. So somebody must have got back and I can imagine the conversation similar to how ours would be with the private, hey, where's the camera? Right. So I think I might have left it on the mount. So,
So it'd be company online.
Yeah.
Company online. Drag the mountain.
Hands across the mountain, with their flashlights looking for this thing. And so we shot the shit out of our 105s as soon as we saw that. So the next day it was like, okay, let's go do BDA, battle damage assessment of this stuff. So we go back up there. I've got, I think it was 9 guys with me. And we're kind of walking the path. I had a couple Afghans and an interpreter with me as well. And we're sort of following that same trail, walking the trail and looking to see what we can find. We can see where we've hit, where we've missed, that kind of stuff. And at one point I looked down at my GPS and I was like, I guess at this point we're far enough removed years wise that I can tell the whole story, which is that I realized that I had crossed the border. Okay. So the PL is the first one to notice that we have crossed the border. So I call a halt and I was like, hey, we crossed and we're in Pakistan. And that squad leader was in front. And honestly, we were just kind of following the trail. And that's his eyes were on that, not so much on the GPS. And he looks down and he's like, oh shoot, you're right. And we're having this conversation. The Afghan guy is like, no, Afghanistan. And I was like, no, Pakistan. We've crossed. And I was showing him on the thing. I was like, see, that's Pakistan, Afghanistan, us. We're in Pakistan. So we're having this conversation. And I hear something and we kind of look up and we see this patrol kind of crest a mountain in front of us. And they were walking had their AKs at the low ready. They had the band of mags with them, and there was 4 of them, and they were in traveling Overwatch formation. Right, like they're actually moving. That was the first thing I remember was like, holy cow, that's what we look like when we patrol. And they're doing their hand arm signal things, whatever. And so now I see that, and I was like, okay, we're doing ours. All right, here we go again. This time it's for real. And I know I'm across the border, but here we go. This is the situation. And as I'm trying to set the guys up, our interpreter carried an AK. He charges his AK. 10,000 feet in a third world country, large, loud metal clank.
Right.
Immediately the dude just kind of stopped and he looked over and we're like made eye contact. Right. And the squad leader, he had his ACOG up and he's looking at me, he's pointing at me. Can I shoot? And I was like, yeah, shoot, and he shot around, hit the dude right in the head and did like the, arms go out. He falls down. The Afghan that we were with, he was a former Mujahideen fighter. He takes a shot, hits the dude in the hip. The guy grabs his hip and then fell over like a rack, like one of those marionettes. Like you just let go of a marionette. That's what it looked like. And then the fighting starts, right? So my first thought, I look over and I was carrying a radio that day as well. And I look over at the RTO and I was like, actually I wasn't carrying a radio that day, but I look over at the RTO and I was like, did you call our grit? He goes, yeah. And then he goes, Bravo 6 wants to talk to you. So I pick up the net. He's like, Bravo 3-6, why the fuck are you in Pakistan? and I was like, Roger, sir. He's like, get the hell out of there now. I was like, okay, got it. So it was like, okay, we need to break contact. We're going to move back, and then we can regroup and fight. In my mind, we're still fighting 3 dudes. I just killed 2 of them. There's probably a 5-man team. I was like, this is nothing. We're outnumbered them 3-1. Like, we're good, So we make our first bounding movement backwards. And then all of a sudden, like, the world erupted. Yeah. And this is not 3 guys. Like, this is a lot more than 3 guys. This is guys on my left. This is guys on my right. They're in front of me. Like, this is just bullets are flying absolutely everywhere in every possible direction. And this is just, what are we talking about? 12, 13 seconds, right? You bound 2 fire teams back and we just bounded. It wasn't very far. It was like, 50 meters. And now all of a sudden they're right on top of us. And you could, when you're in a fight like this, it's hard to describe, but you can feel who has momentum.
Right.
It's not an objective thing. You just feel it. You're like, it's on my side or it's on and they had the momentum. It just, the pressure, the superiority of fire, because we were bounding, we're not shooting, we were moving backwards. And so we just gave up that ground and we were already starting to get tired. And so now at this point, when the fire starts really getting intense, it goes from, I was planning on stopping and having a defense on the border to, I don't know that we can fight this. Like, what's going on? So it's like, okay, artillery, right? Like, this is the first thing I got to do. I get on the radio, nothing. I can't get anybody. Nobody's answering my calls. And we're like on the ground, right? Because you're trying to, bullets are whizzing and zinging and passing and explosions. They're throwing like grenades, and the grenades are blowing up. They're getting caught in these like thin pine tree, stuff. And so they're blowing up overhead and like, branch and stuff is falling down. Birds popping up all around. Can't hear shit, and I couldn't get anybody on the radio. I was like, okay, well, I guess we got to keep going up. At one point I tried to like stand up with the radio. RTO hits the ground back down. He's like, fuck no, And so the squad leader is like, dude, where's artillery? It's like, I'm trying. I've got no radio comms, man. I'm like, okay, we're going to keep finding our way backwards, And so at this point, we start to realize like they are enveloping us almost completely. Mm-hmm. They have moved now. Now the bullets are kind of coming at an angle, and now they're coming like straight up, almost behind me. And so I told the RTO, I was like, keep moving up. The terrain's blocking us. We got to keep moving up. Meanwhile, we're bounding this team. The squad leader's got one team, and I kind of have another one. I'm sort of in between the two. I catch back up with the RTO. The other thing about all of this is that we have so much weight on us.
Right.
We've got and we had the full on IBA with the neck piece and, you know, the Kevlar stuff. And then we had, and we did the Army thing. We did all of the stuff that it says in the Army. You got the Camelback and the 3 magazines and, you know, like 210 rounds of ammunition is what you're carrying. And things changed after this fight. But in this particular fight, we were dressed the way the Army requires. And so heavy. And I remember, like, I feel short of breath telling the story because that's how I was. Like, there was no oxygen. Like, we could not speak. And I remember I was walking and I thought, like, as I'm looking down at the ground and watching the dirt pip up from rounds, thinking, you need to run. And I just physically could not. And guys, I'm fresh out of Airborne Ranger School. Like, I was in great physical shape. I couldn't. I just physically could not run. I was walking. And so I catch up to the RTO and I was like, I kind of look at him. I was like, you got comms? And he just shook his head. Like, we couldn't even speak at this point. You know, it was just, you know, hand arm signals basically became our main source of communication. We couldn't speak. And so I pick up the radio and I put it to my ear. And when I do, I hear 3-6. This is Bravo 6. If you need additional assets, you got to let me know. And I was like, oh, here we go. The tide of this fight's about to change. You know, I'm excited. And I was like, roger that, you know, polar fire mission over, right? Like, I'm ready right now. And I let go of the net and I hear, this is Bravo 6. If you need additional assets, you got to let me know. And he let go. I was like, oh, he's just repeating it over and over because he couldn't hear anything from me. All he got was, I'm troops in contact. He said, get out of Pakistan. Now we're silent. Right. His mind, he's just lost the whole, you know, all of us, we're all gone, right? You know, why would you go 30 minutes without any communication, right? So at that point, I tell the RTO, I was like, look, dude, go all the way back to the trucks. Trucks were at the top of the mountain. There was a road that went all the way to the top on the Afghan side, but you had to park there, and then you could only walk from that. I said, go put this thing on a power amp, call fire on this spot right here. I was like, we're not going to be here by then. The enemy will be here, and I want you to call fire everything right here on this spot. And he kind of nods his head, and I pick him up and push him, and he starts moving. And just as soon as I did that, I hear a call for a medic. And it's like, we don't have a medic. I didn't bring the medic with me. The medic's back in the truck. And so I stand up, and I was like, who's hit? And they're like, no, he's ambulatory. And I was like, okay, good. And as I said that, okay, good, I kind of look over, and this dude had popped up the way we were kind of on the side of a mountain, and I had a fire team shooting, and this dude popped up basically behind them, and I saw him. He hadn't seen me yet, and he was behind the platoon on the way this ridgeline was, and I could see the look on his face. He was like, oh, I got a whole 4 guys. Like, he was excited, right? Also, we were close enough that I could see the look on his face, by the way. So this is, I mean, they were right on top of us. And so I turn, you know, and I'm breathing super hard. I turn, I fire, and it hits right in front of him on the ground. And he turns and he looks at me. And we make eye contact, and he goes to raise his weapon. I'm already here, bro, you know. And I start firing again. And I could tell I was missing it. I'm trying to adjust fire as he's running now. And I managed to stop hitting the rocks in front of him. And he ducks down behind the mountain. I didn't see him again. Don't know if anything happened out of that. And so now I was so focused on that dude. And I was standing up because I had heard the medic call. I've basically just been standing and firing, and everybody kind of spotted me. Right. And so I had one round, and it came like right in front of my face. It was so like I felt it, like, you know, that's where I got my one up, you know, like, yeah, I'm on life number 2, right? You know, and you know, so I kind of fall back. I hit a little pine tree behind me. And then another round came straight at me, and it hits the tree, and the bark kind of smacked me in the face. And I did one of these and looked at my hand, like, did I just get hit? Yeah. And then it was like I stepped outside of myself, and I was like, hey, get the fuck down. You know, so I dropped down to the ground, and you know, I kind of spotted where these guys were coming from. I emptied a magazine into one, emptied a magazine into the other spot, wait a couple seconds, nothing coming my way. I stand up. And when I stand up, me and the squad leader meet up again. He's like, 105's like, you know, I can't, no radio, man. I'm going back to the trucks. And we're having this conversation, and like a flurry of rounds really come close. And Sergeant Miller managed to get his hands on a law rocket out there, which I don't know how he did. And every time he fired one, he always managed to get his hands on another one. He never told me how he got it, but he had it. And he turned around, and there was 3 guys behind this rock. I think the arming range on that law is like 16 meters, and they were about that far away. And he got down. He says, "Backblast area clear." He knew I was right behind him. We just were talking. So I like hop over to the side. He fires this thing. It hits that rock. And then let me tell you, gentlemen, the whole firefight stopped. Both sides. Everybody just stopped for a second. That thing went off, and it was like, that was right in the middle of everybody. That shit was close. Oh, sorry. So we keep fighting back. And, this is the first time I get to see the casualty. And Private Smith was on the ground, and he was shooting. And I thought he had been hit in the hand, because every time he shot, blood was skirting out from his hand. And then he stood up, and he put his hands on the ground. And when he stood up to move, it was like a water faucet out of his face, just blood pouring out of his face. I was like, oh, man, that's not good. Because I was looking at him from that side. And he turns and he looks at me. This whole side of his face is all kind of swollen. And looks at me with the other side and smiles and winks. Like, I'm good to go. It's like, hey, man, go back to the trucks all the way. He's like, nah, man, I'm here with my platoon. I'm not leaving my squad, right? Like, okay, we're running low on ammunition. These guys are starting to get close. Now, by this point, the tide of the battle, you could feel we were sort of equal. It had gone from them overpowering us. Now it was a little bit more even. And
it's because you brought a law to the gunfight.
Every grenade we had been thrown by this point. The law rocket had been thrown. I mean, we had fired so many rounds. So we were running dangerously low. Sergeant Zimmerman was our team leader. He grabs a saw, and the way the trail was, it kind of came to a point and then went around this rock. So you had to make almost like a hard turn. And he's like, hey, everybody go behind me. He did this Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of like holding the saw and just like hip firing this thing, fires 200 rounds, almost melting the barrel, go, everybody goes running. And we get back to the trucks. And by that point, I finally make the radio contact, and Bravo 6 is like, okay, what's going on? I was like, there was a lot of dudes, like, it's bad. He's like, well, where are you? Give me an ACE report, right? So I'm pulling the ACE report, and I look at Sergeant Miller, and I was like, how are we on ammo? He's like, we're black. And I was like, how black? And he points at the saw with a magazine in it. He's like, it's fucking black, right? And I was like, okay, got it. I understand what you mean. There was a case of 203 rounds in the back of the Humvee that somebody had not unloaded, and they were pulling those open and just firing them down the trail to make sure the enemy couldn't follow us down the trail. And so that was the first kind of like really difficult decision. It bothered me for many years, but I've got no ammunition. There's nobody in support. I kind of lost contact with the enemy at this point. Don't have control of the Afghan forces. I know they're around here somewhere, and I feel like trying to make contact with them is going to be a visual contact thing. I don't want to get shot.
Right.
They've been listening to us fight now for hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it's been. And I've got this casualty, and Private Smith is starting to go pale. Right. He's starting to struggle. So I was like, okay, we got to pull out, right? And that bugged me for a while. It was like, okay, they won the day, right? That's how I felt. But I had given up the terrain. I wasn't there, I just
given up Pakistan.
What's that?
You've given up our position in Pakistan.
82nd Airborne platoon leader rewriting American foreign policy right there on
right there.
What is it called? The Duran line?
Yeah, it'd be the Fernandez line. Well, so the RTO had made it back to the rally point at that point. Did the artillery come or no? Did he
no, we caught up to him. Like by the time he made it, we were pretty much there. He had gotten it hooked up. And he was, doing his checks. And by the time I got there, I mean, we were just seconds behind him.
I mean, and to be fair, for anybody who wonders why it takes an RTO that long, I mean, you talk about how heavy all your gear was, and the RTO, in addition to all that gear, is also carrying a not so light radio. RTOs are like the unsung heroes of the infantry, basically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man. So, we got back and this is like my first major fight. It wasn't our biggest fight. But it was probably our least successful one of that deployment. And so we sat down as like a full, the whole group. I know it was a little squad plus, and we just did a strong AAR right there. I mean, Smith got on the helicopter, the medevac, and we just sat down and was like, okay, how do we make sure that never happens again? And this was, that is a really powerful tool when it's done correctly and when you execute on those things. And we came up with a whole bunch of stuff. And, part of it was like, why are we carrying food? Yeah. That's, every ounce of weight that you have on you, it has to be there for a purpose.
Ounces make pounds.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, literally just lay down our gear and was like, what do I do not need on the here?
Yeah.
And how do I fit more ammo? Because I'm not running out of ammunition again. Like, that is a bad feeling.
Right.
When, I remember near the end, like spotting people and not shooting because I'm down to, I was a PL. I was down to 2 magazines.
Right.
One of them was just
tracers.
Tracers. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the last mag.
Yeah.
I want to hear about some of these other firefights that you were in Afghanistan. But first, I just want to take a quick moment to talk about the sponsor for tonight's show, which is MANSCAPED. You can go check them out at manscaped.com. They are a male grooming company offering there's a buzzer. There is...
it's the lawnmower. So, Luis, we could say that you had a close shave in your first
That's
time
right.
out. And so, and all right, was that not a good segue?
That was a good segue.
All right, thanks. Yeah,
Beautiful.
Let's talk about a little bit of male grooming, about Manscaped, one of our favorite products. In fact, somebody had said that they love their Manscaped, but their wife had, my Manscaped kit is great, too great. My wife stole the shaver for our cat. Is our cat a collective term? I don't know.
Is that a
time
pet
to buy
name?
another lawnmower?
Is that a pet name for a part of the anatomy?
Yeah. But for any guys out there who've ever tried to keep your male parts clean, a little deforestation down there, that like traditional trimmers just don't cut it because there's always the risk of nicks.
You get some purple hearts when you try to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Purple heart there.
Yeah. I don't know. You're a business consultant, so you may not want to get this personal. but is male grooming important to you, Luis?
Absolutely, man. You got to feel clean and fresh, right?
Right. You do.
It's important. How I feel is how I'm going to present myself. So I got to feel confident.
100%. And how you present yourself in front of a group, just knowing that you're clean and fresh.
So they sell a kit. It is a male grooming trimmer with all these guards on it.
It has the ceramic blade with the guard and an LED so you can see what's going on down there. And it's nick free. Like, you don't have to worry about cutting yourself. They have the ball deodorizer.
So, folks, go to manscaped.com and use the promo code TEAM20 to get 20% off?
And free shipping.
20% off and free shipping on your order.
It's a product we both enjoy. We talk about it. We show our results quite often.
We can't show them on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not weird.
When you want to try out a new design. But
New design.
we're innovative.
The Superman S is what's in my mind right now. Right?
I prefer a little heart shape, but yeah.
I go for the X. I'm more of a mutant fan, but each to their own. I'm a Marvel guy.
Team 20 promo code, folks. We're selling ball trimmers here, guys.
So One of the things that struck me when you were telling that story, and you said that you were the first person that realized that you were in Pakistan. Having been enlisted and not an officer myself, I would venture to say that your land nav guy, the guy writing your point, was probably pretty competent, and you weren't the first person to know that you were in Pakistan.
May have been the first officer to
You
know.
were just the first officer to know that you were in Pakistan. The other guys were probably down with it. Oh, really? We are? We're in What? No way. Get out of here.
You may be right. I feel like you're probably correct with that. Yeah.
So, Luis, what were some of these other significant actions that came up during this deployment to Afghanistan? I mean, sounds like you were in a hot area, to say the least.
We were getting in stuff, probably kind of, there was like skirmishes, what I would call like an exchange of fire, the quick little, they're testing you out and like, I don't really want to play. And then there was like the legit firefights, and those were happening, when you're fighting, they stay and fight, and those were happening probably once every couple weeks. But like I said, with our AAR, some of the things that we implemented was, I actually started carrying a radio. So my whole load, I ended up, I had 19 magazines as the officer. Yeah. And that was, most guys carried, three. I had 6 carriers of mags, 6 in the back, 18 or 12 in the front. I had a couple grenades. I carried a couple smoke grenades. I had an emitter because we could use that for TACSAT.
Yeah.
I carried an ICOM for internal communications, and then I carried a PRC radio. And then my FO had a radio as well. So we had 2 radios on with the long whips on every one. And then a Camelback, and that was basically it. Like,
you guys got rid of the RBA and all that.
So at first we couldn't, right? Because it's the 82nd, right? So,
right.
But we'd come back. We had, after that I came back to the commander and I showed him like, here's all the things we're doing. We carried a bunch of magazines in the vehicles. We had bandoliers strung behind the seats and boxes of magazines of ammunition, 203 rounds, everything in the truck. I mean, when I went out with two and a half or 3 vehicle convoys, I mean, we probably had 50,000 rounds on us, between us, our bodies and the trucks. Like, we could stay and fight for, if you wanted to fight 14 hours, like I can fight for 14 hours. Like, right. I'm going to have the ammunition for it, and then extra water, right? So just like no food, stop carrying food, stop carrying, just all kinds of stuff that you don't need. But we had told the commander, like, hey, we got to get rid of these IBAs. Like, we are so damn slow on this mountain. These guys are running and we're walking. Like, we've got to downgrade this uniform.
Yeah.
And it was no. And then finally one day I got word, hey, look, the BC and the brigade commander's coming as well. And we're gonna give ourselves the opportunity. We're gonna make the case for us needing to drop this IBA, and we're gonna show them all of our observation points. And there was 4 of them, and they were all on mountaintops. And so I was on the last one, waiting for the battalion commander. And when he came up that mountain, I thought we were gonna kill him. Like, the dude, here's this, I don't know, probably 50-year-old man, no color in his face whatsoever, completely unable to speak. I mean, just like, and all he's done is walk up to this OP. Like, it wasn't even like a fight. And I was like, oh my gosh, we've just killed our lieutenant colonel, And after that day, they said, okay, you may go down to plate carriers.
Yeah.
So we had to almost kill our battalion commander, but we got it.
And we're talking about RBA and IBA, and for people who don't know what we're talking about, we're basically talking about body armor, but we're talking about, I mean, they're flak vest, right?
Yep.
Where they're heavy Kevlar.
It has a shoulder extenders, and the collar that goes around the neck, and
they're not flexible. And
right.
They don't expand. So when you're trying to breathe, because you put them on tight, so you don't have this big thing, but they don't expand. So when you got to breathe, you can't breathe. It's a lot of weight. And compared to a plate carrier, which is just basically, a piece of, a couple pieces of fabric or Cordura nylon or whatever that hold, ceramic or steel plates to cover your vitals from center mass hits,
Yep.
which are significantly lighter.
Yep.
But for a long time, didn't 10th Mountain? I mean, weren't they leaving like our IBA in Tora Bora just on the ground? I thought I'd heard that story.
It's the smart move.
Yeah.
If guys did it, you know, like it was when you can't move, you're more likely to get shot.
Right.
You know,
Right. And the thing is that, you know, we're talking about a very, you know, a still sort of peacetime upper, you know, officer corps, very risk adverse, having people, you have to wear a safety belt when you're in Bagram, you know, during daytime operations, you know, so the idea of giving up a flak jacket or, you know, or whatever, it's like, no, you know, Army regs say this, and that's what we're going to do. But Army
and it was really great on them to recognize that, you know, this was literally putting us in danger, like real danger. You know, and the next day, like we had plate carriers the next day. Like we went to some local Afghan lady was like, "Hey, can you sew these up?"
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so you know, we did that. We got down to the plate carriers, and the other thing is, you know, and I think this was probably something we borrowed from the SF guys is that our 105s that we actually had a platoon of 105 artillerymen from 173rd. Augie Dominguez, their PL out there, good dude. Our TRPs were not numbered, but names, and they were female names. So I still remember Roxy and LaFonda and Sharon.
Bomb Diana right now.
You know, and that's it. And that's so the other thing I started doing is whenever I went out on patrol, I had my guns pointed at the nearest TRP.
Yeah.
So as I traveled, it was moved to TRP, you know, so-and-so, moved to Mary, moved to Roxy, moved to Susan, moved to Sarah. And after a while, I had them memorized. Like I didn't need to look at the map. Like I knew where they were, which mountaintop was Roxy and which one was LaFauna and which one was Sarah, Mary, you know. And so whenever I needed to call artillery, like I knew that my initial contact was troops in contact, prepare fire mission, polar, over, right? Like it was immediate. And I already had the gun pointed in the right direction, you know, and we had the Viper with the distance and direction little guy. Yeah. And so, you know, he'd tell us where. I go, plep, plep, here's your distance and direction, and artillery's landing 30 seconds later. Like, I was not going to mess around. You know, that was an asset that we controlled, we owned, and I had full control of it when we were outside the wire. And anytime we started an engagement, the artillery came instantly. Because I knew how fast these dudes were and how, you know, I knew exactly what happened when I didn't do that. So actually funny, after this, we do this AAR, we kind of start, you know, moving our ammunition stuff, and my commander starts preparing for a full-on company assault on Hill 2911 because of what's just happened, like transpired over the last few days. And so, he stops by the border checkpoint. He's got a whole platoon with him. And he's like, hey, we're going to go up there. We're going to do this thing. You'll be our QRF. And I was like, all right, well, if you need anything, please, like, we're itching to get back into it because I feel like, you know, we just gave up this ground. And so he goes back up there and that night calls for the QRF. Like, hey, you know, go ahead and come out here. So now I'm down to 8 guys. We roll up there. And I walk over to the commander and kind of stroll over like, all right, I got my 8 dudes. And they made this little fire base at the base of this mountain. And he's got a whole platoon of guys somewhere in this mountain. And he goes, hey, we got intel. There's like 60 guys on the mountaintop. I was like, okay, we're gonna do this now. We got mortars. We got, you know, 2 platoons worth of guys. Like, let's get after it. I was like, okay, what am I doing? He's like, okay, you're going to take your unit. You're going to clear the top. What was that, sir? It's like, you're going up. I was like, what's first platoon doing? You know, it's like, well, they're in a blocking position over there, and the mountain was shaped like a J. Okay, so imagine we're at the middle of that little loop of the J, and he was going to have me go up the short and then come back around towards first platoon. I was like, you know, I only got 9 guys. Like, isn't it supposed to be 3-to-1 odds like the other way around? Mm-hmm. Like, not, you know, it's like, well, we've got Apaches coming and we got mortars and like you got many combat multipliers. Okay, I'm going up. Sounds good. So I turn around and my squad leader is coming up to me after having this conversation. And I was like, we're going up. He's like, what? The fuck is first platoon doing? I was like, well, they got the blocking position, but we got Apaches and borders are coming around. He's like, okay. So he turns around and the squad's getting out of the trucks. And they're like, so what's going on? And he's like, we're going up. The fuck is first platoon doing? Like everybody kind of the same conversation, right? So the guys are like, all right. And the squad leader goes, look, guys, if anything happens, I have some addresses on my whiteboard and my hooch. Yeah, and there's some letters, you know what to do. And I was like, okay. And so they pull out and they start smoking some cigarettes. And Captain T comes over and he's like, you really think you should be smoking before you climb a 10,000-foot mountain? I was like, sir, not now. Like, please let them have their cigarette, you know? And so we get the groups ready and we start climbing. I took two Afghans with me and we start climbing up this mountain. And, you know, the higher you get, the more real that starts to feel. Like we are moving into, and it was so dark. I mean, there was no illumination. And one of my guys just freaked out and he started tripping and he was making all kinds of noise. And it was like, dude, you know, you're going to get us killed, man. Yeah. You know, and he had lost bodily control. And, you know, we hadn't gone too far. So I was like, okay, it's getting dark. The Afghans can't see. This guy can't walk. Like, hey, why don't the three of you go back down to the company commander? I'll hold my position right here in between you and them. And when you get down there, call me and I'll keep clearing up to the top. And we were on this like sheer rock face. And I knew that to my left was the edge of the mountain because I could feel it. Yeah. You know, like you could feel the air is lighter over here. And then over here is kind of like, okay, that's vegetation on this side. You know, like I don't know exactly where it is because I can't quite see. And I'm on this sheer rock face. And so like we had gotten behind 3 different rocks. And so I'm sitting there waiting on this call, just trying to be real quiet. And I hear, and I was like, oh shit. They're like right there. Right. And, Adrian Harrells from the sergeant was sitting next to me and he kind of nudges me in the elbow and he's like, sir. And I was like, shh, yeah, I hear it. Shut the fuck up. You know, like, and I get on the radio and I was like, Bravo 6 is 3-6. 3-6 is Bravo 6. Go ahead. I'm like, yeah. Trying to quiet the radio. And I was like, hey, they're right on top of me. Where the hell is these Apaches? Because I can hear them whispering. Yeah. And he goes, I'm not exactly sure. They're about to check in on station. He says this to me. And then I hear one of the most beautiful sounds an infantryman can hear is the sound of an Apache pilot on the radio, which has a very distinct sound. And he goes, Bravo 3-6, this is card player 7-1, come in over. Oh, yes. You know, like card player 7-1, if you're listening, I never met you. I love you. And I said, yeah, Roger, you know, how far out are you? And, you know, I'm still whispering, right? And he's like, you know, seconds, right? And I'm thinking, I don't hear him. I know I'm like, where is this dude? Yeah. And he's like, you know, identify your location. And I was like, okay. And I had a PQ2, the infrared laser, and I had it set to like bat signal, right? Yeah. I shoot it straight to the sky, and he's like, Roger. And I'm like, okay, he can see me. How do I not hear this Apache, right? Yeah. And he comes up there was a ridge line in front of us. Yeah. And he pops up behind it. And then I can hear him, like, as soon as he pops up, and now I'm looking at this Apache, and I was like, oh, there he is. And he's like, identify enemy. I was like, right there. You know, like, just turned my gun, and he starts firing. Oh, gosh, it was glorious. You know, these missiles just start going. The woods just erupt. And by then, it's like, there's no light noise discipline. It's like, get up, go, go, go. You know, like, we're doing this. We're fighting, right? And he was shooting. He was right above us. And the casings from that machine gun were falling on us. And one of the guys got burned. It was like, you know, like these big brass casings falling down. It was like beautiful, though. Didn't even care. And so we get to I got up and I knew at this point, like we had gotten to the top. And it was like I couldn't tell anymore where the mountain fell off. Mm-hmm. And I knew from having patrolled on that mountain that if you you could be fine. And then the next step could be 20 feet drop. Mm-hmm. And so I couldn't see anything. There was no illumination. Only thing I could see was like the little fires and stuff that the enemy had. Mm-hmm. And maybe, you know, some different lights and shit that they, you know, but I couldn't tell where I was. It's like, okay, I'm going to stop right here until I have enough light from BMNT so I can keep going. And I got this Apache, and he's just itching to empty out, his munitions. So I was like, yeah, right over there. How about right over there? Right over there. Then at some point he was like, how about this? He's like, is that? I was like, yeah, sure. That's a bad guy.
Right.
Like, get after it. Right. So we had the Apaches on station for a while. Finally, he was like, hey, look, I'm out of ammo.
Yeah.
Like we shot the entire, I don't know exactly how much Apaches carry. Apache pilots can know, but we shot 2 Apaches worth of everything.
That's amazing.
It was glorious.
Yeah.
So it was just a beautiful thing, the radio, right?
Yeah.
Like,
when those guys are flying nap of the earth and masking the sound and then come up, it's impressive.
Yeah. And everybody's, just the morale of the guys.
Yeah.
Right? Like we went from, there's 3 of us behind this sheer rock face. There's 60 guys whispering distance. I don't know how far they were. I never saw them. I just heard them. I mean, that's pretty damn close to hear somebody whispering. Where you're like, okay, I'm dead. Like you're trying to move as quietly as possible so that when the shooting starts, at least you're facing the right direction to, I now have 2 Apaches, buddy. Like, different fight, homie.
Yeah.
So we took the mountain. As soon as the daylight creeped, the first shot of light, we took the mountaintop. And we ended up having to stay out there like 3 days. And the enemy started to regroup. So it was like this whole week-long battle over this mountaintop. And we got some heavy fog in. The enemy was regrouping and ready to go. And for those paying attention, this was late June of 2005. So, our commander ended up getting a SIGINT team and a human team. That's the one that photo that you have there. So those guys joined us on the mountaintop. They brought some food because we didn't travel with food, like I said. So they brought some food with them, and we basically lived on our bellies for a few days. And then we saw through this thick fog, we could see these multiple fires. And the SIGINT guy and the human guy was like, hey, they've got like a battalion worth of guys they're going to come bring over here. And so my company commander was like, well, they're not coming because they see the size of our force. So let's pull everybody back except Lewis. And we'll leave you out there, and then they can come and you'll be like the bait. We'll be close. Like, all right, great. Thanks guys. And
you guys are the sheep staked down in the meadow, right? The little lamb.
So I was like, okay. And I got this JTAC guy, and I was like, all right, we should be okay. Like, I've got enough assets here. Like, I feel pretty comfortable, especially now that I've had a fight with an Apache. Like, things are, I was feeling comfortable. And so the guy, the human guy, he's starting to get more nervous. He's He's listening to these guys in Pashtun, and he's like, hey, this is it. They're coming. They're coming right now. Like, they're getting ready. It was dark. It was foggy. It was like not great conditions. Like, they are coming. And I look at the JTAC, and I was like, dude, what do we have in the air? He's like, man, we can't get anything. Like, what are you talking about? How can we not get anything? He's like, everything in the country is diverted to some big firefight up north. I was like, how big of a firefight does it got to be? Okay, well, now there's movies about it, and Marcus Luttrell's famous, and there's a workout of the day for the Murphy, right? So that's what was going on, and we couldn't get any support because they were trying to find Marcus out there, and they just lost all those Rangers. I mean, it was obviously it was the right decision on their part, but for me,
right,
being this, I'm thinking I'm facing 100 dudes that like I can't get anything. And the response was like, hey, if you start to get overrun, we'll send somebody to help you. Like, great. That's
Thanks,
just what
bro.
We'll send Bob.
Thanks, bro.
We'll send Bob. Bob's always ready for a scrap.
So I was like, okay, well, can I at least fire artillery at them? Like, no, they're in Pakistan. You can't fire artillery. I was like, geez, well, can I fire the mortars? No, they're in Pakistan. You can't fire the mortars. Like, what can I do? Like, I got to disrupt this somehow.
Right.
I can't have 100 organized guys. They're going to overrun me really quick. They're like, well, you can fire illumination. I'm like, all right. So I get this Viper. I'm trying to shoot on the Viper, and the fog is messing up the reading. So, old school compass and map. Mm-hmm. Remember, I talked about like being really good at those skills, mm-hmm. and that's what I've been focusing on. So I knew how to call artillery with my compass and map, and I call this fire mission in, and the motor sergeant for an illumination. And illumination round, they pop high, so you got to give it 100 meters above the target or something so that it. So I call in the mission. He goes, check elevation. I said, nope, elevation's right over. It was a long pause. Like it was that fast. I told him. He comes back and goes, Roger. And like I'd set it to blow 100 meters below the target. So I was just going to basically fire 120 millimeter cannonball at this fire that I could see of the enemy. And he shot it. And it is the greatest fire mission I've ever called in my life because it hit that fire. I don't know how it hit the fire and the round then popped and it hit a tree. And then this tree just whoosh, like blew up in flames. And I could see these guys like running around, repeat, bring it in again, repeat. And I just kept calling this illumination.
What is an illumination fire for effect like on target?
There is no fire, I just kept saying repeat, and we were just kind of laughing about it. And
that's amazing.
I mean, it was disruptive enough they never came back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll do it.
So out of curiosity, why did they, I mean, this mountaintop had been a problem for a long time. How come they weren't just doing denial by fire the entire time? And then even after this big operation, why'd they send you guys back up there instead of just doing denial by fire ops?
We did. So we did a lot of that. But these guys are really good. And the other thing is like this terrain, I could fire a 105 round. We always fired danger close was everything.
Right.
We're getting firefights 20 meters apart. I could bring in a 105 round 50 meters away from me and not feel any effect because the way the terrain is. Like you got to be right on top of the target. So it didn't matter. I mean, they could get on in the way that if you get on the other side of the mountain trying to shoot you're already max elevation rocket assisted projectile, you're basically coming to try and get on the other side accurately. Like it doesn't matter. You can find ways around it. So we were doing regular missions up there to that mountain and it was so hard to hold. The slope was easier on the Pakistani side. They could bring a lot of guys up there. So it was a regular spot for us to get into fights.
The other challenge with that, and I was going to say this earlier when you guys had engaged that force right on the border, is that the other problem that always happens is then all these reports go out that American forces engaged with innocent Pakistani frontier guards, right? Our frontier guards came under fire by U.S. forces because a lot of times those guys were frontier guards.
Yeah. That stuff happens, right? And I got shot at by Pakistani Border Patrol.
Yeah.
They knew who we were, and it was like, do we shoot back? Like my guys literally were like, what do I do here? And I was like, well, don't shoot back. We'll just leave. That's just, it was the nature. It's not surprising when now today we can look back and the Pakis are excited about the Taliban takeover. Like, okay, we could have told you that in 2005. That's what was going on. Because they were just staging in Pakistan and then they come across the border and attack.
Oh, Pakistan was enabling it. Like Pakistan isn't surprised.
Right.
Now they're just surprised that now it's a problem on their doorstep.
Exactly. Yeah. So we were getting into it kind of pretty regularly, and then we had another big one. The last kind of the biggest fight that I was ever in. And the other thing about that is that we were doing like Ranger School type patrols, right? Mm-hmm. It was you're patrolling in a
Mountain
squad
phase.
plus.
Yeah.
It's mountain phase patrols, know, and doing that, and they were staying and fighting, and it's force on force, and who's going to be the better tactician of the day, who's going to be faster, and that's where I learned about the radio, and we had I always travel, like I said, we had 2 to 3 radios on every mission of the PRCs, and then 2 embedders, so that I could get on TACSAT. ICOM radios, and then I had radios in the truck, like ammunition, communication was absolutely critical, and we got really good at it. And then the last one was in December when they came, tried to bring 300 dudes to overrun the FOB.
How'd that shake out?
Oh, it was a fun night.
What was the FOB? How was the FOB built up at this point, or was it?
Yeah, so that was this all the what we've talked about today, most of it came out of that border checkpoint. But then we would, one platoon was on the checkpoint in OPs, and then you'd switch over, and then you'd run missions out of the FOB.
Oh, right. Okay.
And so that was Camp Tillman.
Right.
Was the FOB that we were on. Camp Tillman had 120 some odd dudes on it, between SF and us. And by that point, it was so 7th group was there when we first started, and then 3rd group, 344 and 341 were the two teams that were there for the rest of the deployment for a large portion of it. So it was 2 SF teams, 2 platoons, infantry, and then platoon of 105s. We had some mortar guys, and then a couple cooks and stuff. And it was a FOB, but it was rough living. Like our water was a big tank that sat on top of the building, and it was like gravity fed. And in the winter, there was like a coat of snow, and that you could see the ice on the top of it, and that's when you were showering with that. So it was like it was an event. Like you get in there, like and soap up, and then get all the soap off here as quick as you can, like once a week type situation. Luckily, we were MANSCAPED.
Yep.
So yeah, like that. That's how you do a segue, Dave.
That nice.
Yeah.
Team 50, right? Or Team 20?
Team 20.
Team 20.
Yeah. And so the company, everybody has to go on leave. And let me tell you, going on leave when your guys are in that is hard.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant experience. And it was like I was detached the whole time. Like those 2 weeks that I was home, I wasn't really there. It was just kind of like I just, if I had the option, I wouldn't have taken it. But you had to take it. And so our company commander had to go on leave. And he came back on December 22nd. His bird landed. And that night was the large enemy attack. So he came back and was like, okay, what happened? Like, no, you were good. Like nothing happened while you were gone. We actually didn't even get into a fight, And by that point in the deployment, so by November, December timeframe, like we were getting into a little bit less. I think 1, the weather sucked.
Yeah.
But 2, by that point we were comfortable in the terrain. We were just as fast as they were, highly skilled. We had made enough adjustments to our TTPs. Like they didn't like fighting us anymore, and they would avoid us. Yeah, I was asleep. I slept in the hooch. The buildings we slept in were like concrete buildings. They had sandbags on the roof. And one of my team leaders came in the room, and it was like, I want to say it was like 1 a.m. or something. I was already asleep. And the door opens up, and he's like, the base is under attack. The FOB's under attack. And he runs to his hooch. And I got up and I pushed the door open. I'm like half asleep, a t-shirt and shorts, step out of my sleeping bag and push the door open. In my mind, I'm thinking like, I don't hear any artillery. I thought it was like another rocket attack, which after a while you stop really caring about the rocket attacks too. Like they don't really affect you,
Right.
Even though they probably should, but it's just the nature. And I pushed this door open, and it was like New Year's Eve, man. Like there was tracer fire right outside the door, like right in front of the door, hitting the ground. Like, oh shit. I shut the door, hit the light, and I was like, let's go. Like, it's for real. Like the base is like we're direct contact. Come on. And step back over to my hooch or my cot, put my feet in the boots, pull the laces tight, shove them down into the side, throw the plate carrier over top, snap it in, and go out the door. I think I put a sweater on because there was snow on the ground, but I was still in my shorts. So I'm in PT shorts, and I kick the door open, and I'm thinking like these guys are in the wire. That's kind of my thought, just based on the amount of fire. Like that's what I thought was going on, and I'm pretty sure everybody else thought the same thing. As soon as you saw that, like this is where it could be anywhere, and I heard an AK firing. And you're there for. By the way, when you shoot as much as we were shooting, you also know like the weight of your weapon, like how many rounds I got left, and you can hear the difference between your weapon and somebody else's weapon. And so I heard this AK firing like right around the corner of the building. I'm like, okay, they're right there, And so I'm kind of moving down the side of the building, sort of trying to hug it. And I see some dude, like I had a my monocle for my night vision. see some dude in my periphery, and I turn, I hit the pec two, and he hit his. And I was like, okay, that's not a bad guy, kind of turn. And we both did the same thing. I was like reacting like, okay. And I approached the corner. I'm sitting at the corner, and I'm ready to turn this corner. I'm like, okay, here we go. The horde is like right on the other side of this building. And I took a breath, turn, lift my weapon up, and I see this fucking A&A soldier up against the wire with his eyes closed and his AK like this, like just shooting with blindly over the wall. I was like, what are you doing? Like, dude, you're not hitting anything. You're just making a sound. So anyway, so we get up on the wall, and the way the base was, there was an observation post out in front of us that actually had got overrun. The guys in there, amazing job. They managed to grab the radios with them. They left the ICOM, I think, is the one that they left behind, but they got all the other radios. So we still had communication without the enemy knowing what was going on, and kind of held the position as long as they could, and then fell back from the OP. And so on this mountaintop, there's one laser in the middle of it, and it wasn't moving. And so we all thought that they were dead, because the enemy had come down the mountain. So the mountain was just muzzle flashes all over it. It looked like a Christmas tree lit up, just muzzle flashes, hundreds and hundreds of them. And then this one laser right in the middle of it. And it wasn't moving. Like I said, turns out they had just made their way down the mountain, talk up the laser, like, don't shoot right here, and held their position. And they all made it out of there, but we didn't know that at the time, right? So
Right.
It was just, man the walls, straight up Game of Thrones style, like, here we go, and cooks on the walls, shoot like everybody. And they had gotten pretty close. One of the mortar guys was hand shooting the 60.
Wow.
Yeah, and he got a silver star that day. It was just it was surreal, to see, like, you hear about stuff like that in like Vietnam, right? Like, we were soldiers to this hundreds of guys. Like, that's not supposed to happen today, And they were so close. I mean, we couldn't fire artillery because they were right on top of us, right? Like, the guns can't even traverse to hit that spot.
Right. How so? For people who might not know, so he's saying that one of the mortarmen had a 60 millimeter mortar, which is a smaller infantry size mortar, which can sort of be held with one hand, and especially if it has to be fired at a flat trajectory. Like, the tripod just won't do that, so he's got
No one's doing that. You'll literally break your hand.
No,
if
but
you
he
do that. with a hip plate on the ground.
He's laid in with the plate.
Yeah.
But he's got to hold it, aim it with the right.
If they're that close, I mean, you're going to have the mortar tube like almost perpendicular.
Okay.
Straight up, because it's coming down like within 50 meters of yourself.
Okay.
Like a direct fire weapon, you won't be able to use a mortar like that. But you can fire within like 15 meters. I mean, if you're dug in within like 10, 15 meters of yourself, if you had to.
Right.
Yeah.
Does it have to be dug in, or can you just drop that plate? And
No.
put it
I
down?
mean, if the troops are dug in that you're firing to support.
Oh, right. Okay.
But I mean, otherwise, you can fire within 50 meters of yourself easy.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
That's crazy. So, how many guys were stuck up on the mountain?
It was like 3 guys. We had an OP, and so they saw these guys coming, and they saw the horde. They had their couple machine guns and stuff. They started firing, and then it was like, whoa, like like I said, when you could feel that overwhelming, you get 100 dudes firing at you, like. You leave that position. I mean, the OP was blasted all to hell. They'd fired, I don't know how many RPGs into it. I mean, they just totally destroyed it. And I'm not sure what they thought when they got out there. I mean, it had collapsed, a lot of it. So they probably thought, like, these dudes are probably under the rubble, not realizing that they had got out and they had taken the radios with them.
And so the assault force basically passed them by?
Yeah.
Wow.
They were in the middle of it, man. They were truly in the middle of it.
That's
crazy.
crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. It's so wild. And, and the assault force got pretty close. They were within 100 meters of the wire, but, you got a couple SF teams and some paratroopers, like, they're going to fight hard.
Right.
And we got the machine guns up and running, and then they got the 50s off the trucks, like, move the trucks around so you can bring the 50 cal into the fight. And Yeah, I mean, and you know, like you had to be exposed, but that's what it took, and you could see the muzzle flashes. So, and you know, at night we fight better at night,
Right.
because we've got all our lasers, right? So you could see. It was interesting, you know, like I had a vision of both fights, right? And through one eye, I could see just what basically the enemy was saying, and through my other eye, I could see all the lasers,
Yeah.
and I could see my team leader symbols that were basically showing people where to shoot, right? And I could see like the symbol, and then the fire, the massive fire on those symbols, you know, like so for somebody that doesn't know, like the night vision, there's these lasers on the weapon that are infrared, and there's shapes that you can put on them, like a filter that makes like either a square or a triangle or a circle. And, you know, different levels of leaders would have different ones. And so, you know, our guys could point out targets for the different gunners and stuff. And so you see, you know, could see these R75 lasers, and they were kind of targeting at the different locations, and the enemy started to retreat. And we fought for a while. And then, you know, when the fire sort of died down a little bit, start sending guys to go, you know, put on some cold weather gear, because we were standing in the snow, and my legs were pink, you know, and of course I'm the last guy to go, because, you know, PL, you gotta, you know, inconvenience yourself to the very last point. And as it was approaching my turn, platoon sergeant came back, and he's like, hey, CO wants to talk to us in the talk. And so I go into the talk, and there was like every leader was in this little command center, and everybody was staring at this one screen of the JTAC's tough book, and it was a predator feed, and they had spotted the retreating enemy, this one group of them. And so he gave him the okay. The predator fires that hellfire, it blew it to shit, you know, and it was like Super Bowl in there, you know. Everybody's cheering, you know, all the SF guys in there, everybody's giving each other high fives. And you know, I was like, yeah, you know, like I'm pretty excited too. I'm still cold, but yeah. You know, like that was cool. And company commander looks at me and goes, you're going out there. I was like, okay, where's that? You know, how far am I going? And I don't remember, but it was like 10, 15 kilometers away.
Oh my God.
After you put your pants on.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So I go back, you know, get geared up, get the guys together that's going to go. And then we patrolled all day. And so the thing is, like, you can march 7.5 miles, and you can do that in a couple hours. Not a huge deal. You patrol 15 kilometers. That's like 12 to 15 hours of movement. It's a long movement, because you are looking for enemy. You know, this isn't just like let's go 15-minute mile. You're patrolling. And, you know, we saw there's like blood trails and gear left behind. I mean, this is 300 dudes worth of shit that they just left, you know? And you could see like, oh, that dude was dead. And they picked him up, so then it was like, wait a second, they had like medevac, you know? And we found the casualty collection point, and like they had like 7 trucks that they had, that you could tell. Yeah, you could tell where they had collected their casualties, and you could see the tire tracks from the trucks, and they were like, you know, multiples in different directions. And then of course, like the guys, like that dude probably died because there was a lot of blood on that one spot. And for the whole movement, we were seeing little blood trails. There's some gear. There's an LCE. There's a weapon. Like somebody just got tired of carrying his AK, or maybe he thought if I wasn't carrying an AK, I wouldn't look like an enemy, you know,
Right.
Whatever it may be. And we finally get to that ridge line the next day at like 3 PM. So the fighting started the previous night, 11, 12, I don't know exactly what time. This is 3 PM the following day. And remember I said you road march to the fight. So we have just walked 15 kilometers and through the mountains, patrolling up and down. And we get to this location, and it was like, it was again, right on the border. So it was like a wadi that basically delineated the border, and 2 really steep ridges in between. And so one ridge is in Afghanistan, the other ridge is in Pakistan. And then this wadi was the border. And so company commander was with me that day, and he's like, hey, well, I'll take the unit down. You take a unit up. And so me and Sergeant Miller were up atop. Again, I said I carried the radio. I had the long whip up. We were far enough away. Like I had to have the big radio antenna real high, and Miller was right in front of me. And we were kind of moving towards this enemy location. And he spots a guy and he's like, hey, I got a dude. I think he's alive. And I was like right behind him, trying to look at it. And I was like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I think so. Can I shoot him? I was like, yeah, go for it. And so he goes, bang, 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 bang. And I was like, dude, I think he's dead. And as soon as I said that, the dude shot back. And it was like, there was this branch that came out. I got this long whip antenna. It was like, hey, shoot over here, shoot over here. There's this branch that kind of came out in front of my face. The branch just explodes. And we were like on this kind of sheer ridgeline. I'd sort of lean into the wall, and Miller made this like yelp and ducked behind me. So I thought he got hit because he just like, and then ducked behind me. I was like, okay, Miller got hit, and I focus on the enemy, right? So I'm shooting back, and then I turn and I look, and he's got his arm kind of dangling. He dislocated his shoulder, which was the injury that got him out of the Q course. And this dude just pops it back in. And then reaches back and he's like, that mother. And he grabs that law rocket that he always had, like a new law rocket. And I'm looking at him and he goes, Ch-ch-ch, and he gets down on a knee. I'm in front of him now. And he's got this law rocket and it's this wide. I mean, it's barely wide enough. It's only wide enough for one guy, really. And I look down at the rocket and I look at him. We made this eye contact. And it was like we spoke without speaking, where I was like, hey, I'm in front of you. You're going to burn me. And he's like, I don't give a shit. I'm shooting this. Get out of the way. And I was like, well, where do I go? And so I just lifted a leg up and kind of like leaned into the mountain. He smiled and fired that thing and then took off behind it. And so we we start moving towards this enemy. And some Paki attack helicopter shows up.
Oh, shit.
On the Pakistani side. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Oh, shit. Right? I don't know what side this dude's on. That's an attack. I know what it's like to have them on my side, and they're not on my side. Like, I don't know what this dude's on. And so we're in this now, another firefight here. And so I get on the radio, and I was like, hey, do we have any air assets? I got this, helicopter, and I had to get on TACSAT because nobody could hear me. And at the time, TACSAT in Afghanistan was one net, or actually it was two, I think, for the whole country. So, like, everybody in the country could hear it. All coalition forces, U.S., Canadian, British, everybody could hear it. And so I call, I'm troops in contact, blah, blah, blah. And I hear this guy come on. He's got a British accent. And he's like, Roger, be there 5 minutes. And I was like, okay, who are you? Like, he gave me some thing. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, I'm a Harrier, mate. And I was like, okay, I got a Harrier coming. Like, it might be intimidating enough. And he was like, he did me the same thing. It was like 20 seconds out. And now, I'm on the top of this ridgeline. Like, where is this dude? I'm looking, and then I hear it, and I look down, and I see this Harrier. He was below me, and he's coming up towards me. And I was like, holy shit. I made, like, I'm looking at this pilot as he's coming up, and he came over us so close. Like, I feel like I could have just, like, given him a high five, man. Almost knocked us off this mountain from the blast of his Harrier. When this Paki helicopter was there, he brings this Harrier and turns it sideways to like show off all his munitions and kind of like almost stops in the air and just shoots in front of this guy. Like, didn't shoot him, just sort of like did this Top Gun style like turning thing. The helicopter goes whoop, took off. Like,
that's amazing.
So I asked him, I was like, hey man, can you see how many dudes there are? And he came in upside down, like flipped his aircraft upside down and looked into the ridge upside down and was like, oh, there's only one guy left. It was like, oh, okay, we got that, and we took it over. But that was that Harrier pilot was insane, man.
Luis, for the bonus segment, I'd like to talk to you about Iraq. But I would like to have you, before we go tonight, talk a little bit about, your time, leaving the military and becoming a business consultant and some of these other things that you've gotten into in life since then.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that opportunity. So, yeah, I got out of the Army, and it was a difficult transition. And one of the things about transitioning out of the military is that you're not just leaving a job. You're leaving a lifestyle. You're leaving all of your friends, your social community, your job, your structure. So much. And that was a hard transition. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. Like, I was so ready to get out by the time I did. Like, I thought, this is easy. And it wasn't. So I went actually to go work for John Deere for a while. And I led an assembly line, and I did some marketing, and then I brought new products to market for them. And eventually my wife wanted to move back home. I'm here in Tucson, Arizona. And so I came out here and started a kind of consulting business where what we do is we look at different expense categories for businesses and make sure they're not paying for stuff they don't need, optimize those services, and we get paid out of the savings. So if we don't perform, we don't get paid, which is kind of, something you learn from the military there. It's you don't eat if you don't perform type stuff.
Yeah.
So easy profit positive only for businesses.
Yeah. And then you wrote a book.
I did. Yeah. So actually what happened was I was a leader of leaders. It was kind of like a civilian sort of company commander type role. And I wanted to do kind of a study to teach people how to lead, because having a crappy boss is it's an absolutely miserable experience. And so I've been through enough leadership training, both in the military and civilian world, and I've read enough books. And it was like a lot of this stuff, they try to make things objective. They try to tell you oh, here's a conversation flow map. If you say this, they'll say this. And then you do your little dress rehearsal thing and it goes perfect. And then you get into the real thing and it's nothing like that.
Right.
And so, in the beginning, I talked about the mindset of having, and so I wanted to write a book that was something that somebody could read a chapter in about 15 minutes. Like, let's say if I got my team together and I say, hey, we're going to do a chapter a week, something where you can read a chapter in 15 minutes, because most people won't do their homework until they get the meeting reminder that says, oh, shoot, we're going to talk about this leadership book in 15 minutes. So they can read a chapter in 15 minutes. And then at the end of it, there's a lesson of here's the overall assessment and then the task that you should work on. And the tasks are things like go thank somebody today, and it tell you how to thank somebody. You guys invited me on this podcast, a little bit of a nobody, and I get to tell my story, and it's awesome, and highlight these wonderful people. And I really appreciate that opportunity. Right. So that we teach people how to say thank you and how to serve others and all of this stuff to kind of build that mindset in weekly tasks type thing. And so that was the idea behind the book, of something that somebody could do. What's
the title? What's the title of the book? If people want to go check it out, hold it up.
Yeah, it's called Keep On Leading. Let me see here. I can't figure it. There you go. Keep On Leading. And it's it's like I said, it's real easy read. And the idea is it's a training program for your leaders that's going to cost you $10, $12, whatever it is. You're not going to get a cheaper training program than this one that is actually pretty effective.
Obviously, if you wrote this book, with your experiences in the civilian world, you saw a need. What were some of the big differences you saw in military leadership, or especially combat? Sort of the platoon and company level leadership compared to leadership that you find in the civilian world. What do you think that military leaders can bring and teach the civilian world?
Well, I think you're going to find, good and bad leaders in both organizations. Honestly, it doesn't even matter how many hoops people have to jump through. Somehow, turds make it through everything, right? You'll get them everywhere because it's the key is to be a good leader. In my opinion, is to have to be humble. And not be so full of yourself, right? That ego, self-serving mentality is what's going to turn people off. In the military, you have more opportunities to learn not to be that way. Mm-hmm. And in the infantry in particular, if you say, follow me, you want to make sure they follow you, right? So you gotta, there's more opportunity, and there's more opportunities to weed those guys out because you're spending so much time together. Mm-hmm. So I think as a percentage wise, you probably get more of them in the civilian world that don't fully understand that. But having people that get that mentality and have it as a core element, I think is harder to develop when you don't have the buddy rush, right? Because, and this is the key to the buddy rush is that, cover me while I move is there's a huge analogy here, right? It's here's my life. Okay. Watch it for the next 3 to 5 seconds.
Right.
And then I'll watch yours for the next 3 to 5 seconds, right? It's just implicit trust that you have to put on somebody else, complete. And your focus is only on that next piece of cover. And that other person's job is to protect you. And you can't teach that in the civilian world, right? Like,
Right.
It's a lot harder to work that. Whereas the buddy rush is kind of like, that's the first thing you learn. And it's built into you.
Yeah.
And tell us about your podcast, Built with Grit. You're telling us a little bit about it before we started the show, but I'd like to hear you, tell people and maybe direct some people towards it.
Sure. So I started Built with Grit because I think business owners, the more folks that I consult with and talk to realize like this is it's a real challenge. And it's, I equated a lot to being airborne, right? Like the green light comes, you jump out of the plane. You've got 3.5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then after that, you got to make some decisions, but no matter what decision you make, you can't get back on the plane. Mm-hmm. So whatever happens now, right. And so, starting a business is very similar to that. You've got to make it work, mm-hmm. Or, pull a reserve of some sort. Right. Mm-hmm. And so these people have pretty amazing stories. I mean, one gal that I had on there was, she was a felon and couldn't find a job. So she grabbed a towel and a spray bottle and walked into a business that, can I clean? She couldn't find a job. She couldn't make it work. So she started a business, has 10 employees now here in the city. Like that is. And so when I think about like, that is the grit that it takes to build a business. And some of these stories are just, they're really phenomenal to hear people. And of course I learned something from every single one of them. So,
and where can people go to find the podcast?
That is on YouTube.
Okay.
And then, I publish it through Anchor. Yeah.
Built with Grit. So on YouTube and Anchor, and does Anchor farm it out to like Spotify and?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So M Technic, thank you for your donation, and same Marion and John, thank you. And then we have a question for you here, Luis. Biggest challenge as a leader and hardest decision to make.
Ooh. Wow. Well, I feel like the biggest challenge has been honestly building that the idea that I'm not the center of my own world, and being married and having kids really helped with that. Finding Jesus was another thing that helped me out with that quite a bit. You kind of get a big head after, a few of those things and get out of Ranger school and, I've been surrounded, outnumbered, and they couldn't take me,
Yeah.
I start to think I'm pretty damn cool, and so that doesn't help you lead teams. So, and having having discipline, self-discipline, those are all difficult things. Hardest decision, firing somebody. Of course, there's a lot of hard decisions in combat, but, having an employee that I know he's got a kid and I know he's going through a divorce and he's fighting for custody of his child. And I got to fire him because he's unsafe and he's going to get himself or somebody else killed. And he's had, multiple different safety incidents. And that sucks, that's hard to do. And to tell a guy like, I'm sorry, man, but good luck. Right. That's tough.
Yeah.
Luis, I'd like you to stick around for a moment for the bonus segment to talk about Iraq. And for everyone else out there, thank you for joining us tonight. Please check out our Patreon. There's a link down in the description if you want to support the show and get access to these bonus segments. There's also a link. You can check out our Instagram. Go give us a positive review on iTunes or wherever you go listen to podcasts. We appreciate it.
Also, there was a shout out to you. Hey, sir, it's McCarthy.
Nice. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad he listened in. I hope I did those guys justice.
It's great, man. These are great stories.
Honestly, I think that is one of the traits for a leader, for an officer. If your guys will still talk to you, right? No, seriously though, right? Because it's like you say, especially in the infantry, there are the officers that realize that, like you said in the beginning, my job is to clear their obstacles. My job is to facilitate them doing their job, right? And then you have those, especially those PLs, a lot of times those young PLs who, sometimes when the sun comes up in the morning, you don't know if it's actually the sun or their spotlight. And I think sometimes it takes those guys a while if they do learn that if you make things easy for your guys, they're going to make you look good. You don't have to make yourself look good. Your guys will make you look good because they'll want to work hard for you.
Yeah. That's absolutely true all across the board. No matter where you are, no matter what group you're leading, you go out of your way. At John Deere, I was given the projects that didn't work. Oh, the ROI on this never works. This is the crap projects. They would give me those and we would blast them out because it wasn't me. Like I wasn't special. It was just that I knew how to motivate folks and give them the opportunity to do what they're good at. Like this is what your skill is. Let's do that.
Right. No, that's great, man. And we wish you massive success with your book and any future books, with your podcast. Please check out his podcast, Built with Grit. It sounds fascinating. I'll definitely check it out.
And thank you for sharing these stories with us. I'm glad that the stories of your soldiers and your men are getting told. It's awesome.
Yeah, great dudes, really great dudes.
BP Izzy, thank you for your donation, and everyone. We'll see you next week. Take care out there, and until next.